Most people think they will never get a DUI.
They imagine it happens to someone reckless or completely out of control.
We represent a lot of people that are far from failures. Doctors, airline pilots, other lawyers, judges. You're a good human, but guess what? You made a mistake.
But in reality, many DUI cases start with something ordinary: drinks, dinner, meeting up with friends, or someone feeling fine to drive home.
And then suddenly, flashing lights in the rearview mirror.
I think that's the biggest thing that people have forgotten about. Part of our system is supposed to be rehabilitative.
Welcome back to The Glamorous Grind, where we break down the law and how it shows up in real life.
Today, we're diving into DUI defense, one of the most misunderstood areas of criminal law.
Joining us are defense attorneys Laura and Cole, who focus their practice on representing individuals charged with driving under the influence.
We're going to talk about why they chose this field and what happens when someone finds themselves in this situation. So thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
We're very excited to have you, and we want to hear all about everything.
The yin yang.
Yes.
That makes the firm work. I think that's what it is. We are polar opposite people. The way we handle cases is different. The way our brains work are very different. He's very big picture. I'm very detailed. Actually, this came to me yesterday. I was thinking, and I don't want to offend you, but I don't know if this is the right analogy.
I'm not easily offended.
He's hard to offend.
I'm in criminal law. I'm not easily offended.
I easily offend. I'm not easily offended.
I can do the offending. But go ahead.
Is that we're almost like a restaurant, like front of the house, back of the house.
Yeah.
Right? Is that I'm not the person in the front going, hey, look at this. But Cole is, and Cole's welcoming, and everyone wants to talk to him, and he knows, and he'll make you feel safe. And he comes in the back, and we talk about what needs to be done in the nitty-gritty details, and that's me. Yeah. I'm not the showstopper. I'm not trying to be that person. And it works really well for us.
No, it does. It's been a really good synergy. I've often joked that, in court, you know how it is. When you're the courtroom lawyer, you get all the accolades. You get all the attaboys, all the people, oh, you did a great job on that case. Well, nobody ever takes the time to ask me, how did you get there? Because I always say, talk to her. We've had clients who say, I cannot thank you enough for doing this. You've done this great work for us. And I always say, you know what? Thank Lauren. Because I kind of conceived myself as the wind-up toy, and she does the winding, points me in the right direction, puts a file in my hand and says, off you go.
Yes.
And it works.
Especially for big fights or mean clients. I'm like, oh, I'm going to get him real riled up for this
Right.
one. And it works, and it's great.
It does.
And it took me a while to get there. He drove me crazy. Again, I'm OCD, notes on everything, highlights this and that. And we would go to trial, and I would have prepared months and months, and I can tell you what page something's on, and this and that. And when are we going to go over this, Cole? When are we going to do this? Morning of trial, 5 minutes before, I'm so annoyed, and I hand him what he's supposed to prepare. He looks over, oh, yeah, and hands it back to me, and I'm like, this is going to be a disaster. And it isn't, and he nails it, and he knows it. Our brains are just so different. And so the way I can work something up for him, he can look at that. But the good thing about Cole, too, is that you're like that for everyone. We have public defenders. We have a lot of young attorneys who come and ask him, how do you do that? How do you get out of the minutia and be a good trial lawyer? I think that's really different as a trial lawyer, and I'm research and motions and things like that. And so I think it takes two very different people to make things work. But we have the same goal. We do the same quality of life and what's important to us and the balance.
Most of the people that we represent, we do a lot of drunk driving cases, some domestic violence cases, things like that. But we've also handled, everything up to first-degree murder. But the majority of the people that we represent are not criminals. And I'll tell that to prospective clients on the phone that are beating themselves up. I've ruined my life. I'm so screwed. And I tell them, no, you haven't. Stay in the game with us here. Okay, we're going to work this, or we're going to work together. But if I'm telling them that we're going to work together, that means I have to be accessible to them just as much as I expect them to be accessible to me.
Makes sense. So much of lawyering, regardless, all the fields, criminal law, family law, for me, employment law, people have so much uncertainty, and that causes so much anxiety, because usually when they're in that situation, their entire life is about to change.
Right.
And I think part of hiring a lawyer is having that stability of, this person will kind of be my guide,
right,
and it will be okay.
Yeah.
Somehow, I don't know how, but it will be okay.
Yeah.
So I think from that perspective, it is worth it to pay a premium to
I
get
agree.
that type of access.
And we're not for everybody. I mean, it's just that, and I tell this to a lot of prospective clients when they call in. It's like, if you're, a college kid that's working at Best Buy and you're in trouble, paying what we charge just isn't worth it for you. I mean, we're not going to deliver that much value, and we're going to take every last nickel you have for the next 2 years of your life. Why? And so I tell people that, but there's, it's that whole 80-20 rule. You do a really good job for 20% of the people, and the other 80% send them on their way and wish them well, but you don't have to be, and we see a lot of our colleagues fall prey to this, that they just have to take every case that comes in the door.
The biggest thing for me is you need to trust the person you're going to be working with. Right. This is a big deal. Whatever you're going through, employment, family, criminal, it doesn't matter. This is one of the most important things they've ever been through, maybe the most money they've ever spent on something. Yeah. And so the relationship you have with the person on the other end, that you feel like, I can call this person. And some people love calling and cold being like, shut up, you're fine. It's not going to be, that protective man that he's able to be versus a hand holder. And so it is nice to have someone who says, you can come to this firm and you're safe. Regardless of what you're looking for, you're going to have guidance, you're going to have access. But you need to trust us that we know what's best. We're going to give you those options and put you in a position where you have multiple choices to make, right. Multiple good choices. And so that's what I pride ourselves on, is that you can trust what we're doing. You can trust that between the two of us, there's multiple sets of eyes. We've had so many conversations about the case and the best way to do it. And so, the boutique firm works for us.
Works.
What we have.
Well, hopefully I never get a DUI or commit any crime. But if I do, I feel comfortable hearing that you're so detail-oriented and you can look at something 5 minutes and go and win.
Yeah,
I'd come to you.
I sort of bristle at being called a criminal defense attorney because, again, we don't represent criminals. We have some bright lines cases that we don't take. We don't touch things like child molestation. We don't touch rape or sex crimes.
Me personally, animal abuse is on my list of no thank yous also.
Again, and the reason for that isn't that we couldn't do a good job with them, but there is somebody better out there that can divorce themselves from the facts of that case, that you'll be better served. And we know who those people are. We'll refer them out.
So better call Saul?
Yeah, don't call Saul. But we do tell people that, I don't like people calling my clients criminals. You're at a cocktail party. You represent criminals. And it's funny because we do, again, a lot of drunk driving cases, and people become very sanctimonious about that. You represent drunk drivers, they break the law. It's like, you probably broke the law on your way to this meeting today. You probably broke the law last night when you rolled through that stop sign. Does that make you a criminal? Now, if you rolled through that stop sign every time you go home, and that one day there happened to be a kid on a bike and you hit him, are you a criminal now? I mean, does that make you a bad person? Because we see this all the time. And it's one of the things we have to overcome with a lot of jurors is this stigma that nobody thinks drunk driving is a good thing. They don't. I mean, I think everybody agrees that you shouldn't do it, but so many people have done it and then become very judgmental about it. I ask this in jury selection all the time. How many of you, be honest, at some point in your life, have maybe driven a couple of times, maybe even just once, go back even to your college days when maybe you shouldn't? Almost every hand goes up. And those are the people I want on my jury, because I'm saying, look, my client isn't a criminal. My client was one of the unlucky ones that got caught, or hopefully had an accident, or God forbid there's some serious injuries or a fatality. But very rarely do we see the hardened criminals coming into our office, the gangbangers, and we just don't. They know not to call us.
What do you think about those who are on their third DUI and they're still driving and endangering the lives of others?
I think that the first goal is to find out what's going on with them.
Right.
We try to get them into treatment right away, and that's what the court wants to see.
I think that's the biggest thing that people have forgotten about our system, is that part of our system is supposed to be rehabilitative, and by putting someone in prison or something doesn't necessarily help. We all who we are for a reason. I listened to your very first episode where you were talking about both of you and how you kind of came to be here in America and all of that. And to me, it is so important to see that we all have our story. We all come from a childhood that puts you into a position where you are the adult you are, and some of us have access to therapy or to parents that are home all the time, and some of us don't. And so to see and then judge adults when we are in this position at our worst, to not realize there's a lot more than someone who's just a bad person who, there's poor judgment calls, sure. But there's also, horrible situations where they're doing their best or they don't know how to do better. And so to understand that it's not just, okay, well, right, let me get this great plea deal and get this person gone, but we are all living in this world. So, right, if you have someone who's offended 3 times, it's dangerous for us, dangerous for you, but what's going on with that person? Because that's not very typical. And so to say, how can we help community in general by making sure that this person's not here again, by their next offense, they're not killing someone. And a lot of people forget about that. And in the courts all the time, we're pushing for other options than jail or prison. And we're kind of looked at like we're the problem when you go, no, but we're going to be here again. If we don't solve this, especially with our veterans, we have so many military veterans, and that's not just DUI, that's domestic violence and, robbery and anything, resisting arrest. And you realize, hey, there's an underlying mental health issue here, undiagnosed, untreated, or even if it is diagnosed and treated, that we're still struggling with, that people forget the human component in our job a lot. And I think that we do a good job of recognizing that, addressing that early on.
One of the things that I say to judges a lot of the time, if we have somebody like that who's a second or a third offender, I'll have an opponent, a prosecutor, that wants them to go into custody. And so when we take the case from the beginning, the first thing we do is say, we got to start treatment now. And if it's like a third offense or a felony case, you need to get into alcohol treatment immediately, or drug treatment, whatever it is. Typically, that's inpatient, live-in rehab. Many times, they've never availed themselves. They didn't even know that they could. They didn't know that they could go through their health insurance and find something like that. So we get them into a program. Then once they finish that program, now the case is up and running, and now they're into an outpatient program where they're still being monitored and tested and all of that. Many times we'll have put such a runway in front of them, 3, 4, 5 months of great treatment, sobriety, everything. And then I'll look at my opponent and I'll look at the judge and I'll tell them that, so you want to interrupt all that now? He's got back with his family. He's working, he or she is working, earning a living, sober, and you want to put the brakes on all that, send him to the county jail where when the time he gets out, he's had no treatment. He's lost his job, has estranged from his family now, and then when he reoffends, we'll all stand around scratching our heads wondering what we could have done differently.
You guys are talking this entire conversation, I have goosebumps. Because it's just so many things that no one thinks about.
It's really sad.
It's true.
And you both are so passionate and believe so deeply in what you do and your clients, and that in and of itself is so important, and it's so rare.
You're counselors at criminal law.
Yeah.
We are, and again, we're very different. She talks to the clients, and it's like, here's a cup of tea and a warm blanket, and I'm kind of more like putting them in a headlock. Come on, knock it out, that kind of stuff. That's a funny. Really quickly, we had a client years ago. I won't use the word on it, but up in Orange County. But if you saw the guy, physically imposing. Big guy, 6'3", shaved head, big old thick goatee, tattoos, biceps bulging, owns a big construction company up in Orange County, right? This guy is I'm looking at him, and personality-wise, very alpha, very type A, all of that. But he was afraid that he had screwed up so badly that he was going to lose his company. And he was having nightmares about it. He's like, this is how I support my family. And he would call me, he would text me, and he would say, hey, do you have a minute? I'm like, yeah, sure. I'm handling cases in San Diego, Orange County, Riverside. I'm in my car a lot, driving so I handle a ton, as I'm sure all of us do, handle a ton of business when you're in the car. So I'd call him, and he would say, wouldn't be what you would expect from a guy that looks like that. He'd say, I just really need to hear your voice right now. I'm like, call her. Okay. I'm flattered, but what's on your mind? And he would just be like, I don't know. And I'd have to talk him in off the ledge. But it was that kind of a vibe, like a counselor, where you're being told, I'm putting my faith in you, not just in the court system, but to help me navigate through. Sometimes for our clients, most of the time for our clients, the absolute worst they've ever been through. And keep in mind, we represent a lot of people that are far from failures. Doctors, airline pilots, other lawyers, judges, we've represented all of them. It's hard to look at those people and say, yeah, you're just a career screw up. No, you're not. You're a good human that's kicked ass your entire life. But guess what? You made a mistake. And people do that. They do make mistakes. And that's how we're going to represent you in court.
I really love it that you guys don't represent child molesters and offenders, because I wish they could just honestly chop their thing off, put them away,
and a lot of people,
and that's it.
No
criminal justice for them.
As a member of society, as a parent, and the same thing I think with people that commit sex crimes, rapes, and things like that. It's just, look, I can go on my criminal defense attorney soapbox. They're entitled to a vigorous defense under the Constitution. Yeah, great. But not from me, because my heart isn't in that.
Right.
And there is somebody better, and I would be doing them a disservice. This is what I'll tell them. I would be doing you a disservice if I took your case, because this is not my wheelhouse. There are people that thrive in that space, but that's not us.
Right. It's so different. So what I used to represent employers when they were sued by employees, and I used to do PI work on the defense side. And one of the main reasons I wanted to switch over to the plaintiff side is because when you're on defense, especially working in big law, you don't get to choose who you represent.
Oh, yeah.
And whether you believe in a case or not, you gotta build the best defense you can.
Yep.
And it was really, really difficult for me. I really struggled because I felt like I was just an awful lawyer when I didn't believe in the case.
Yeah.
And it is a disservice to the client. Now, Alona knows, like, the second I find out a client's lying or untruthful or, I just fire them.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. I won't even take a lien. They can go take the case somewhere else, because I also can't represent cases I don't believe in.
You don't believe it. And that's why I think in the criminal justice system, really the unsung heroes are the public defenders, because they don't get to choose. And they get, in many cases, the worst of the worst. They get the people that don't care, the people that treat them like they're terrible people just because they're trying to help them. But God bless them, because they perform such a valuable role and they don't get any credit for it.
Right.
We have lots of friends that are public defenders. We've trained lots of public defenders. We refer cases, to say, hey, just stay with the public defender. And I'll tell this to people. I guess we're allowed to use profanity here, so I will. But many times I'll talk to people who are price shopping. And I'll say, look, if you're price shopping, I'm not the guy. We're not the people you want if you're just price shopping. But do yourself a favor. If price is the issue for you, don't hire some dog shit lawyer that's just going to say, oh, I'll be the cheapest guy in town. I always say, well, congratulations, you're about to be represented by Walmart. He's cheap for a reason, because that's the only way that they can compete against us, is I can undercut you. Congratulations, you're being represented by the lowest bidder. Hope that works out for you. And I tell them at that point, go to the public defenders, because the public defenders are in those courts every day. They know the judges, they know the prosecutors, and most importantly, they know the law, and they know what they're doing. And if the public defender you have is brand new, there's a supervisor that's watching them, and the supervisor that's watching them. You're going to come out of this okay. If you want cheap, go with free, and there are going to be better lawyers.
I think this is golden advice, and I have a personal story on that, where I've realized that the public and others who wanted to hire me when I was a new lawyer to defend them against DUI, for like $1,500 or whatever. It was cheap to go, plea not guilty, over the counter, and then appear and then plea them out. I realized there was no point. I wasn't delivering any value to those people.
None.
They could get those services for free, but when I just opened up my law firm, I had everything coming through the doors, and I was getting a lot of DUI cases. But I really felt like I was not giving them anything different than they would get for free. An ex-boyfriend of mine, when I was in my early 20s, shortly after I opened up my law firm, I met him. He got a DUI, driving a gas lamp, and I'm no longer doing criminal. It's not my cup of tea. I don't like it. Go hire a lawyer. And he's like, no, just go appear in court for me. Just do it. So I did him a favor, which we still laugh about nowadays. He pled guilty. I got him public service. I went to court, and I didn't know he was rich, so I got him 10 days of public service to go clean the garbage on the highways and under the highways. And he was a financial advisor. And so he had to go do that. and he got bitten by bees.
Oh no.
So he didn't finish his work day, and they didn't give him credit for that day. He had to go back, and it took him a long time to complete his public service. He's like, I was getting paid like minimum wage to go clean this. I could have just paid this and be done. I'm like, I had no idea you were wealthy back then. Like, that's what I just did because I didn't know any better for everybody. I was just giving public service because people were looking for a cheap lawyer. I was cheap, out of law school, new lawyer, and doing public service was a thing to do. So if you are conscious about price, get a public defender.
Get a public defender. I mean, they're better lawyers. Again, we know who the players are in town, who the real lawyers are, and so many of the people that are out there marketing themselves, that's what it really is. It's a marketing machine. They have salespeople that, call themselves case managers. Bullshit. You're not managing it. Your job is to separate them from their checkbook. That's your job, and you're paid commission for that. I don't know the ethics of that. I don't want to know the ethics of that. All I know is that we don't do it.
And I think a big thing too that people don't realize is when you are hiring that person, that might be, I hope we don't have anyone who's $1,500 charging $1,500 anymore for DUI.
I'm sure if you look far enough, you'll find
right,
somebody.
but $2,500, things like that. I think what people don't realize is maybe you have one court date, your attorney can go and plead you guilty. There's no issues in the case. Maybe your attorney is comfortable with that. What if there is an issue? What if you need an expert? Where does that money come from? So then your client can't afford it. You're not doing that as an attorney for your client. Where if they went to the public defender, they do get a private investigator as part of that. So a lot of times people go, well, my case is, there's really important, there's an accident, but do you have the funds to do this? And I took a class in law school that was called Access to Justice, and it talks about there's big, gap between people who, are trying to look for attorneys and can pay for one versus, getting a public defender for free. And it's hard. There is an issue here. But being the attorney that charges $1,500, $2,500 is not the solution. I don't think you're doing your client a service.
Absolutely.
Disservice.
It's also the same in family law.
Yeah.
When someone is looking for a cheap lawyer, you get a cheap lawyer who doesn't know what they're doing because they're new. Exactly. They're not going to be well prepared and know your facts and really argue well for you in court because they don't have that experience. They take everything that walks through the door. They'll take a DUI, kind of like when I was first out of law school, right? I'll take your DUI. I'll draft your trust. I'll do this. I did everything under the sun because I was new and I wasn't good at anything the first year. So it was all the same. I was learning. But there are people who take family law cases or criminal law cases or whatever may come their way because they need to make money. They need to make a living.
Correct.
And they're not going to deliver value or do you any good. It's just to pay their bills.
Right.
And you don't want to go to a lawyer like that. No.
Right. And again, it's our philosophy has really always been that we're not for everybody. And yes, if someone has a situation where there could be a potential trial or motion work that needs to be done, we kind of have to brace them in advance that, look, there's going to be additional costs because we have to bring in outside people. We may need an accident reconstructionist. We may need a blood alcohol toxicologist. We may need a medical examiner. We may need all of these things. It depends on what the issues are. But you need to know that it doesn't stop with our fee, that there's going to be more if we decide to go that route. And I think something Lauren touched on earlier is, and I will say this to clients, my job when I'm in court is to try to put you, the client, and there's no nice way to say this, in an uncomfortable spot. Meaning, you've got a great deal that's on the table right now, but you've also got a hell of a defense if we want to push this all the way to a trial. You're going to make that choice. We're going to give you the tools and say, here's what we think. And we get this all the time. What do you think my chances are? I'm like, we're going to be in front of a jury. You're going to be in front of, the old joke is 12 people not smart enough to get out of jury duty. That's who's going to be deciding your fate. But the reality of it is, but I use this in my closing arguments, is these are 12 complete strangers that are never going to meet you. They're never going to know you. They're never going to see you again. And they're never going to have to answer to you. So, but I also say that to jurors, saying, you can make an easy snap judgment here. Just, hey, we don't really care because you're never going to have to see my client again. You're never going to have to explain yourself to him. You're never going to have to face him again. And I try to personalize that and say, but from his vantage point or her vantage point, do you know how terrifying that is? That I've got 12 people that never have to be accountable to me ever again in my life that are going to decide potentially what the rest of my life is going to look like. That's terrifying. So take your role as a juror seriously. And that, so it's the same thing that we talk with our clients about you've got two really good options here. You decide, but you have to have the resources to do it.
So what specifically motivated you guys to get into DUI defense?
When I graduated law school, I got hired with one of the big insurance defense firms. And I have nothing bad to say about that because the senior partner that I worked for is one of the most respected judges on the bench right now and a dear, dear friend of mine. We've remained friends through 30 plus years. But it wasn't for me. So I left. I quit. Like, I'm out. Probably a testament to the kind of friends that I had at the time. I had several friends right out of the gate within probably 6 months of me quitting that firm, all that got picked up for drunk driving.
Very considerate, yes.
Yes. Why not hire our idiot friend that just quit his job? He's a lawyer. He has nothing to do. He's doing what we call toaster law. Whatever pops up. You got a dog bite case? Sure, I'm your man. That was me. And I didn't know that nobody in town took drunk driving cases to trial. I didn't know that. So I started, okay, I've got these 3 drunk driving cases, 3 friends of mine. I had no one to call and ask. I'm like, who does this stuff? We had a guy in town that called himself Mr. DUI. He's no longer with us. But they ran kind of just a volume operation. I needed to talk. How do I strategize a case like this? What does this mean in the police? There was nobody. Light bulb. There's a big hole in the market here. So I started taking these cases to trial. And I did, I believe, 3 drunk driving trials right out of the gate and won all 3 of them. Hung one of them and not guilty the other 2. Well, I mean, this is like the wrong clock that's right twice a day. I don't know how I did that, but eventually people start asking questions like, hey, who is this guy? This guy on the scene here, this cocky young dude that's winning these DUI cases. I'm like, I don't know how I did it. I just did it, and it happened. And at that point, it was like, okay, now I decide. I had read a book in law school called The Man to See. It was about Edward Bennett Williams, famous trial lawyer, owner of the Washington Redskins. He was the mob lawyer he's the guy that when he was prosecuting a big mafioso back in the 1950s, and Bobby Kennedy Sr. was the attorney general. And Bobby Kennedy said, if he's found not guilty, this mobster, I will jump off the Empire State Building. Well, Edward Bennett Williams took the case to trial, not guilty, and he sent Bobby Kennedy a parachute as a gag. And I just fucking loved that. So I decided, you know what? I'm going to become, in this area of the law, the man to see. And so I went to every conference, every seminar. I traveled, drove from here to Seattle to attend a seminar because I couldn't afford airfare. It was just that kind of a gig.
So cool.
And then it just sort of took off. And this was in the early days of the internet. And so I got the website DUISanDiego.com, which automatically, just by its letters, in those days, before even Google was a thing, it optimized up. So it just went like this really quickly. And, I've tried not to pigeonhole myself and say, you're only a DUI lawyer, because again, I've handled everything from jaywalking to first-degree murder with a firearm.
And I'm a little bit more liberal of the two between us in terms of, so I started off, I was an intern at the public defender's office. I didn't think I wanted to be a defense attorney at all. I thought I was going to be a prosecutor. I'm from Santa Barbara. My family is, religious, and they're, small town, and I wasn't exposed to a lot growing up, good or bad, whether I'm lucky that I was sheltered or not. I didn't really realize until I moved to San Diego kind of the realities of a lot of things. And so coming here, and then I knew I wanted to do criminal law, but I thought, I should be a prosecutor, until I found myself with the public defender being an intern, and I saw a lot of things that I didn't realize were true. That you hear these stories, and you think, this is just some propaganda and liberal chat. And it was things that kind of shocked me a little bit. And I felt really protective in the role of being a defense attorney to say, like, whoa, there needs someone to police other people, or at least make sure if you are prosecuting someone that you're doing it for the right reason, that you have the evidence to do that someone has represented you and made sure you're being treated similarly to someone else who's been in that situation. That frustrates me, even with what we see in DUI law. We have some cases that they're trying to hang this person from the rafters, and others where you go, you didn't even give this case a second look. it doesn't make sense. It's not fair sometimes when you see the laws being applied. And so for me, I am more liberal in what we would take. Cases, I remember one of my first cases I was shocked at the public defenders as an intern was a gang case, and thinking, why would someone be in a gang? Why would you need to do that? And even hearing this kid say, well, every day I walk to school, and if I went this way, I got jumped by this gang. If I went this way, I got jumped by this gang. And until I joined one, I was beaten up every day. My money was taken, and had no one to protect it. And you realize we're a product of our environment. So I'm not as, what? That's a stranger abduction case. Oh my gosh. I'm not that grasping my pearls about it.
Yeah.
But I still want to know, what do we have here? And is this person willing to realize that they may have some mental health component to that? They may have some emotional issues. Is there something there? Or do we just have someone who is, sometimes people are just plain criminals,
Just
right?
a
But
hooligan.
it's not usually always like that. So for me, I am a little bit more open to what comes through the door, what kind of cases that we would take, that I would take. And I think I do like that. The DUI side of things, people think it's especially misdemeanors, it's easy. No, it's not. There's so many components, science and DMV and constantly changing legislation. Right now we have something actually going up where they're trying to change all of the DUI laws. They're trying to increase punishment, and I think it's reactionary. We see Officer I forget her name, I'm sorry now, Lauren Craven, who was just killed on the freeway, the CHP officer. There was a DUI accident.
La Mesa PD.
La Mesa PD. She got out of her vehicle to help one of the injured people, and she got hit by a military police officer who was drunk, and he killed her. It's just, there's so many aspects to all of this stuff that every day I think you could ask us, and it would depend on the case. It would really depend on the case and the people. For me, I don't have I'm not going to take it unless it's some of those things we talked about, and then I'm just not comfortable doing those. And like you said, there are people who are very well situated to do that and would do an amazing job.
Okay, so time for a question from one of our listeners.
Okay.
Free legal advice?
This is a question from Reddit. I'm a med student, and a couple of months ago, I received a DUI. I rarely ever drink and have never driven while drunk before in my life. However, after receiving news that one of my close friends had passed, I decided to go to a local bar and get pretty drunk to ease the pain. After a couple of hours, I decided to get in my car and sleep. Since it was winter and it was cold outside, I decided to turn on my car so I could get some heat. I slept in my car for what seemed like an hour or so until a police officer knocked on my door. Long story short, since I was intoxicated and my car was technically turned on, I was charged with a DUI. After talking with my lawyers for some time, it seems pretty unlikely that this case is going to get dismissed or even reduced. My state is very harsh on DUI, so they usually try their best to get guilty verdicts and pleas. I guess my question is, am I screwed professionally? I have no priors and I'm a male in my early 20s. I just feel so hopeless and depressed right now. I know there's a section to explain any of your convictions, but I feel like every residency is just going to filter me out and not even give me a chance since I am a misdemeanor. I can't help but feel like I worked so hard just to get here, just so I can throw it all down the drain. Go Reddit.
Does it indicate what state they're from?
It does not.
Okay, so
That's not uncommon. Just
It's not
general
uncommon.
thought. This is so many of our clients in San Diego, especially. We have military who have to deal with command, the rules there. Like we said, doctors, lawyers, judges, pilots, anyone. I think a lot of people don't realize some of the professions are either state or federally licensed, right? So there's this person here is going to have to deal with boards later on. So how does that impact them? So
hospital privileges.
This person's asking not just about this offense and what would happen, but what we call collateral consequences that come along with an arrest or a conviction for DUI.
The reason I asked what state it is, there's different laws in different states. Now, California is what we call a volitional movement state, okay? I don't want to get too lost in the legal weeds here, but in California, there has to be evidence that you drove. That case would never get filed in San Diego if there was no evidence. Now, if there's somebody who said, yeah, wait a minute, we got a 911 call that you were driving. Yeah, you're parked now in your driveway or wherever you are, but we have video of a parking structure that you're driving in or something that establishes that you're the driver. But there are states that we call APC states, actual physical control. And that means you only need to be in the car capable of driving and you can be prosecuted for a DUI.
That is crazy.
That is crazy. And you see, that's because it's basically attempted drunk driving, but you weren't attempting to do anything. You were just drunk in your car, but you weren't driving, you were asleep. And I'm sorry, isn't that what we want the drunk person to do? Yeah. Go to your car, pass out.
Yeah.
So you're telling me that if he got in his passenger seat and slept there, he'd be okay because he's not in physical control. Yeah, it doesn't matter. In California, we have this case right now where we have a young man that was parked, got drunk, walked to his car, sat in his car, turned on the engine because it was cold, and fell asleep. Duck, 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 and he got arrested. Well, if a prosecutor doesn't dismiss that case, that's going to be a 15-minute not guilty verdict because the law in California says there's a jury instruction that says you must have evidence that the car was physically moved while the person was intoxicated.
What if the cop asked him when they knocked on the window, were you driving? How long ago had you been sleeping?
Yeah, he said,
and made admissions.
And he said exactly that. He said, I had a glass of wine with dinner and I drove here. I've been here a couple of hours. Okay, well, you had a glass of wine with dinner. That's not against the law. It's not against the law to have a glass of wine with dinner and drive. We have a legal limit. And it would take 2-3 good glasses of wine for you to get over that legal limit.
It depends when you drank versus when you were stopped. I mean,
all day.
It's so scientific. So that alone shouldn't be enough. We have, like you said, we have this case right now, and we're going to take it to trial because someone's statements alone of when they drove, is not sufficient to prove the case against them.
But in answer to the
collateral consequences,
the Reddit person, I would want to know in your state what is the law, because it's about 50-50 across the country. I have colleagues that are defense attorneys in pretty much every state, and some of them say, something like that could be enough for a DUI. So if you're in an APC state, an actual physical control state, you have an uphill battle. But again, I still don't think a plea bargain would be something I'd be encouraging my client to take in a case like that. That's still, my sales pitch to the jury is very simple. He did exactly what we want somebody who's drunk to do. We want him to go to his car and go to sleep, as opposed to, and I've used this argument in front of juries many times on cases like this. Say, I had a case where a guy was pulled off the freeway, up on an embankment, parked his car, went to sleep. He had left a wedding, he had had a lot to drink, didn't feel it. When he started feeling it, he's like, whoa, I've had too much, pulled himself over, went to sleep. And my argument to the jury was, if you convict him, you're telling him he should have just gone for it. He should have just tried to make it home because he probably would have made it. Most people that do this get away with it. But he did the responsible thing, and now you want to punish him for that? And
assuming he got
not guilty. Not guilty in a very short verdict.
It feels like those types of laws incentivize people to drunk drive.
I agree with that.
Because you're more likely to get stopped by a cop if you're sleeping in your car.
Yeah.
Than if you drive drunk and you just get home, because a lot of people speed or swerve a little. There's no guarantee you'll
get home. You can always get comfy in a back seat and lay instead of sleeping.
I've had that case. A client of mine.
Can they still get arrested?
He did. He did, because he was blocking.
So in California, you're not supposed to prosecute that, though. Again, we're a volitional movement, and so unless you have proof of that or circumstantial evidence of that. But in this person's situation, that is an APC state, sure, they might go down, right? So what happens then? I think to bring it back to this is, are they going to be okay? They're working to get a residency. They're going to have to deal with the boards. We deal with that all the time.
Well, they should put up a bigger fight than they're being asked to put up, first of all, because the consequences are pretty heavy.
You hear that? Yeah. Fight back.
Yeah.
Get to be done.
Not every lawyer is a trial lawyer. Not every lawyer has the balls to go to trial and fight and know what to do and think on their feet.
Correct.
Well, so you got to get the right person to go and fight for you.
And sometimes people don't have, so not even the lawyer, but this person here, what they have at risk, right? So if they can potentially take a plea deal, whether or not they think they broke the law, is that going to be smarter than going to trial and potentially being convicted of DUI when they know they have to face the boards? This is the hard stuff that people have to think about, right? Because you'd think, well, I want to go to trial. I want my day in court. Okay, but is that if you're convicted, is that worse than taking a plea deal for something you may or may not have done? It's a hard thing as an attorney to have to advise someone on that.
Yeah, a lot of the boards look at what they call early acknowledgement of wrongdoing, medical boards, things like that. We work with professional licensing attorneys when we have either a medical doctor or a nurse or a medical student. We refer them out to a professional license who will say, you know, will the board take a dim view of this if they go to trial and are convicted, as opposed to saying, I did it, I'm guilty, I own it. Well, and that's part of the calculus that goes into this. But in a case like this, where it's like, well, but you didn't, what? I'm trying to figure out what crime you committed. That's a drunk in public, maybe, but you're not even in public. You're in your own car. So my advice to the person that sent the question in is get a trial lawyer. Get a trial lawyer that tries these cases and can actually advise you as to the wisdom of going to trial.
I have a question for you that I think many of you may be wondering about. If you get pulled over for DUI and the officer asks you to take the breathalyzer test or to step out and walk, can you refuse either one?
It's a very simple. In legal terms, there's exceptions. One, if you're on probation, you have to take the breath test if you have a prior DUI. If you're under 21, you have to take the little handheld breath test. Other than that, if they ask you to get out and, you know, pat your belly and tap your head on all that bullshit, the best pre-arrest. The best legal answer is go fuck yourself.
We're on a podcast, so I was going to say he's holding up his middle finger.
Go fuck yourself. No, I'm not doing anything. If you think I'm under the influence, take me in. I'll spend the night in jail. Fair enough. But all you're doing is giving them more evidence against you.
Your license in California gets automatically suspended if you say no. Isn't that true?
No. Very good question.
Post-arrest.
And very, very common misconception. To do the gymnastics on the roadside and the little sharper image breath test that they have on the roadside, those are field sobriety tests, always optional. Ask how many police officers will tell you that they're optional. They don't. Here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to check your eyes. No, the hell you are. No, you're not. But if you're arrested, this is California law, if you're arrested for suspicion of DUI, then you have an obligation to take a blood or a breath test.
And if you refuse it.
But not that breath test there. It's a breath test usually at the jail or at the police station. It's an actual machine, not, like I said, a little 9-volt battery-operated piece of shit that's like a smoke detector. You don't have to take that one unless you're on probation or you're under 21.
No, but they can say, I suspect you're drunk and arrest you without you doing those tests.
Correct.
So then you're going to be stuck taking it anyways, no?
Correct. And you're going to have to take it because that's called the implied consent law in California. You impliedly consented that if you are granted a privilege to drive in this state and you are arrested for suspicion of DUI, that you will consent to either what we call a chemical test, a blood or a breath test. That does not include the roadside breath test. Again, I keep saying this, unless you're on DUI probation or unless you're under 21. Other than that, if you're over 21, it's your first offense. You do not have to balance the ball on your forehead on the side of the road like you're a seal at SeaWorld. You don't have to do any of that, and you don't have to take the handheld breath test. They're going to arrest you. They're going to take you to the police station or to the jail, and there you have to take a blood or breath test.
But like if you're not drinking, then might as well.
But why would you want to give them even more evidence? Here's the thing.
But if you're not drinking,
it doesn't matter. So I hate to say this again, and you're good friends with a lot of cops. I'm apologizing to all of them ahead of time, but I'm very skeptical. But so these are a divided attention test. The whole point, they're going to yell at me if they hear me say this, is to trick you, to not to trick you, but to test multiple things at one time, right? So while they pull up and I say, Mila, I think you're DUI, right? I'm the officer. I'm going to come up and knock on your window. Well, I'm not just asking you, where are you coming from? Where are you going? I'm asking for your license. I'm asking for your insurance. I'm doing multiple things. So I'm watching to see, are you fumbling? Can you do those things?
I fumble just because I get
nervous.
So if you haven't been drinking,
you're still nervous.
This officer's still watching all of those things. And they'll say, oh, she dropped her ID. She handed me her insurance card or her registration versus her insurance.
Or her driver's license instead of a credit card.
Yes. So one way or another, all of this stuff is being watched, right? So it is a thing of, do I give them more to interact with, to believe that this may be, I might have nystagmus for a medical issue, right? But they think it's alcohol. So sure, do I actually do field sobriety test? Do I interact with this officer? Do I not?
Basically guaranteeing that you're going to get arrested if you say no.
Yes.
Maybe.
Yeah, you are. But I'd rather be arrested and not have enough evidence that they can convict me than give them a whole host of evidence on the roadside that they can use against you. Here's a scenario. You've had 3 drinks, let's say, okay? You're feeling it a little bit. you don't think you're probably over the limit, but maybe you're close, all right? You drive, you get pulled over. Officer comes up and says, I want you to take a breath test. I want you to come out and do all the roadside tests. And keep in mind, I'm certified as an instructor in field sobriety tests. I can make you fail them right now, or I can make you pass them right now, just on how I choose to interpret what you're doing.
And how you explain them.
Yeah. Yeah, I can explain them in such a way that you're confused and you do them incorrectly. I can explain them or I can just grade you in a sense, and the way that the police officers kind of run for cover is, did they pass that test? Well, it's not pass or fail. Yeah, it is. Come on. Yeah, it is. It's pass or fail, but they won't ever say that. They won't commit to that. And let's say you blow 0.10. The legal limit in California is 0.08. So you're just barely over, right? Now they process you, they tow your car, you're sitting around waiting. Finally, they say, okay, we're going to take you to jail. You drive all the way downtown. There's a line of cars, police cars waiting. You finally get into the jail. An hour has passed, or 2 hours have passed, let's say. They finally get you in and they say, okay, now you got to do a blood or breath test, this implied consent test. And you do, let's say, a blood test. And it comes back 0.07. Well, the implied consent test is the test that matters the most. And you're under the limit. Now, you gave them a test on the roadside that shows you were higher at the time of driving, because it's closer to the time of driving, but you were coming down. And now you're a 0.07, but it's 2 hours later. But if you didn't give them that test, it's anybody's guess whether you were higher or lower. Maybe you had just finished drinking and your blood alcohol was rising over the period of time, which it takes usually half hour, even an hour for the alcohol to fully absorb itself into your bloodstream. So like if you do a shot right now and I take your blood 1 minute later, you're still going to be zeros. But if I do it 20 minutes or 30 minutes later, we're going to see it because it's now migrated from your stomach through your small intestine into your bloodstream. So what you've done is you've given a prosecutor 2 points on a graph to say, well, yeah, okay, they're 0.07 2 hours later, but over here you see they were a 0.10. But without that, it's just a 0.07. My job just got a lot easier to defend you.
Thank you. Now that makes sense.
And that's why they'll use the phrase, the totality of the circumstances.
Interesting.
But when it's just the field sobriety tests alone, that's it. It's very difficult because they are so subjective. And again, most cops will tell you that honestly.
Excellent advice. Thank you.
You know, we defend a lot of these cases, drunk driving cases, and handle people that have just made an honest mistake and people where alcohol has literally destroyed their lives. We've seen all points in between. Uber. Use Uber, okay? It doesn't take much, and now that we've seen, this is a discussion we didn't even get into today, but now with cannabis, weed being legal, it's so easy to get arrested if they smell weed on you, even if you smoked a day or two ago.
We have no legal limit, so
there's no legal limit.
Unlike a 0.08 with booze.
And there's no way to test the legal limit.
Any evidence that you've been smoking weed, they arrest you immediately.
Oh, really?
Typically.
Not even smoking, but right.
What about gummies?
Same. I mean, again, if you're under the influence, you're under the influence. And
Okay.
again, it doesn't, but if somebody's had a gummy and they're, you're not going to smell weed on them, maybe unless there's a baggie of weed gummies in their dashboard or something, there has to be evidence for the officer to form the probable cause to arrest you, right? But if you're clearly in a daze, what they're saying is, I don't know what's causing you to be in this daze. Is it prescription medication? Is it cannabis? Or do you have a medical condition? I don't know, but in the interest of public safety, I've got to arrest you, take you down to the police station, and we're going to do a blood test. We're going to find out what's going on.
Voluntary blood test. Like you have no choice. You're going to get
once you've been arrested.
Implied consent, right?
Implied consent law.
You do have a choice.
And if it's drugs, it's blood or urine. That's what happens.
Even if you refuse, they'll get a warrant.
And they'll hold you down and take your blood if they have to.
It's so scientific. There is so many. So your question before when you asked him, and he said, don't give the roadside breath test because you gave a higher one. Well, what if that one was a lower one? Then you have 2 points in the graph showing that you weren't actually over the legal limit when you're driving. It is so difficult. There's not one answer that we can give that's going to be suitable for all cases. It is very.
And that's our job. I mean, that's where we go over it and say, okay, in this particular situation, these are the defenses that are jumping off the page. Well, if they jump off the page to us, they jump off the page to everybody. Our job is to find the ones that don't jump off the page. Well, hold on a minute. There's more to this, and that's what it may be. But the law, if it's an alcohol case and you've been arrested, you're supposed to be given your option of blood or breath. If they suspect drugs, then they're supposed to offer you a breath test first to rule out alcohol. And then if you blow zeros, but you're still higher than a kite on something, then you have your choice of blood or urine.
I know we're out of time, but I want to have you guys back to talk
Okay.
about two things that we haven't talked about.
Okay.
Your craziest cases
Oh God.
and how you see the laws changing with the legalization of marijuana and that
That's a
being
whole
lot
nother
more
topic.
common, because I think that
It's huge.
those are two really important things that
It's
will be really
huge,
interesting.
and it's a very big misconception right now. And again, we'll table this for later, but I mean, it's very common for people to say, well, I was smoking weed, but I have a medical card. Like, you can legally buy alcohol, but you can't drink a bunch of it and drive. You can legally buy marijuana, but you can't drive while
I
you're
get
high.
the same thing in employment
Yeah.
cases.
Yeah. Well, and then and you guys have that situation where the California Supreme Court said that they can employers, even though it's legal, can still use it as a great basis to fire somebody.
Yeah.
Call it a dirty test, even though it's legal.
Yep.
It's crazy.
DUI cases are often surrounded by stigma and misunderstanding, but conversations like this help people better understand the law and their rights.
Huge thank you to Lauren and Cole for joining. Cole. What did I say? Cole.
So just say douchebag. Everybody knows who you're talking about.
Huge thank you to Lauren and Cole for joining us today and sharing their expertise.
Make sure to subscribe and follow The Glamorous Grind so you never miss an episode.
And if you have a question you'd like us to answer on Let's Get Gritty, leave it in the comments or send it to podcast@antoniamiranda.com.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on The Glamorous Grind.
Thank you, guys.
you.
Cool.
I learned a lot today.